Welcome, welcome. We're skipping the intro today. We're going straight into the stream because we're starting just a little bit late. Bunch of things that I feel like we could talk about today on the stream. Title of the stream is The Dignity of Fools. So the first thing I want to talk about is dignity. Dignity can mean a lot. Okay. Dignity can mean a lot of things. Everybody has a certain amount of dignity by virtue of being a human being. But people sell their dignity all the time. So here's your aphorism for the day. Dignity is very easy to sell, but it is impossible to buy, at least with money. Instead, you end up buying dignity with things like patience, pain, going without. That's how you end up maintaining your dignity. Dignity tends to be something that you have and you sell it away. People often give it away for nothing. I'm reminded, I'm trying to remember which Dostoevsky book it's in. I think Crime and Punishment. You know, your biggest crime is that you sold your soul for nothing. And people do that all the time. I came across a fact, and I don't remember the fact exactly, so you can check it. But the average girl on OnlyFans, I know that there are men on OnlyFans too that make content, but the average content maker on OnlyFans, predominantly women, makes an average of like $50 a month, or maybe it's even less. And that's a really low number. So you have to think the $50 that people are making per month, you can't even expect that, because there are some people that are making like $1 million a month. So they're pushing the average up way higher than it is. Most of the people are probably making less than $50 a month. So what they're doing is they're selling their dignity for almost nothing. They are putting naked pictures of themselves out onto the internet forever, potentially. And there's a hope that that sort of stuff gets forgotten in the tidal wave of data and information that ends up happening with the nature of the internet. But think about how cheaply people are willing to sell their dignity. They will expose their body, expose the intimate pieces of themselves for less than $50 to everyone, like to the entire public. And dignity, because dignity is something that it can be inside yourself, it could be just you, or it can be part of a set of relationships between people, how people respect you. The more public that is, the lower your dignity. One of the running themes that you'll find on like Reddit relationship advice threads and forums, like whether it's the like Am I the Asshole forum, or like the marriage forum, or the Dead Bedrooms forum, which is a very interesting rabbit hole. If you've never looked at the Dead Bedrooms forum on Reddit, if you never looked at that subreddit, it is a trip. And it's a trip because of what people will put themselves through, how much they will lower themselves and their dignity, how much dignity they will essentially give away to have just a tiny sliver of something that they really want. Like they are really in a lot of impossible situations. But anyway, if you read a lot of these, what you find is people come to a point in a relationship where they're asked to give away their dignity for the hope, the potential to maintain what they already have. So an example would be, my girlfriend suggested that we open up the relationship. What's the proper response to opening up the relationship? A lot of people will be like, well, you just say no. Well, no, what you actually do is you break up with her, because she is demanding that you remove your dignity, that you become a cuckold, right? That you do things that you have no respect for yourself or for the relationship that you're in. So the proper response is to like just immediately break it off. And sometimes people do that. And so they're like, no, this is against my dignity. I'm not going to even entertain this idea. And the fact that you would suggest it shows me that you really don't have any respect for me as it is, and you want me to be an undignified and worthless person. You view me as without value. So I'm gonna kick you to the curb. But lots of people will come up to something like that, and it's like, my girlfriend wanted to open the relationship, and it's like, I don't want to lose her. It's like, you already lost her, dude. Dude, you already lost her. She already doesn't have any respect for you, or she never would have asked that. But having to cross over that threshold and accept that harsh reality is something that a lot of people really don't want to do. People will come up with lots of reasons for explaining, say, why people don't want to hang out with them. Like, why don't people like me? People don't like me because I'm smart. No, people don't like you because you have a personality that they don't enjoy being around. That can be fixed. And so one of the things I think about with behavior is behavior can be fixed, right? There's certain things about yourself that can't be fixed, right? I could cut my hair, but I can't like change the shape of my skull not very easily. Like I could have pretty severe plastic surgery and like suck out the cheeks or like shave the jaw or like put some jaw implants so I'd look super Giga Chad or whatever. But I can't change my skull really. And I can't change my height very easily. I know that there's height surgery, and that's something that I guess we could talk about in relation to this, right? But, you know, you could change your behavior. It's not always easy to change your behavior because most of your behavior is instinctive and habitual. You do the things that you habituate yourself to do. So one of your habits might be looking at social media all the time. Well, that's a habit you can break. You just habituate into something different. You just make yourself do a different thing, and then you're doing that thing. You're like, I want to be in good shape. I want to work out. Well, you just make yourself, you have the discipline to do that one thing for like a week, and then that habituates you, and you're thinking about it all the time, and you're doing it all the time. So if you don't get the response from people that you want in a social situation, you can ask someone you trust, like, how do I come off with people? And you can change that, right? There's things that you can change. I noticed that there's certain personalities, especially, you know, if Fox Day were on the show, he would point them out as like gammas, right? They tend to be really rigid about their behavior patterns, and they don't like their ego to be scratched by someone suggesting that other people don't like their behavior, or other people don't like their personality. They don't like the things that they say and they suggest. And they instead create a narrative where like, there's some indelible piece of me that exists in my behaviors, my speech patterns, my thoughts, my, so it's like, people don't like me because I'm too smart. Well, if you imagine the fedora tipping atheist, I mentioned, most people don't actually dislike atheists at all. But if you ask people, oh, do you hate atheists? They're like, oh, atheists are just, they're fedora tipping jerks, because every person that identifies as an atheist is kind of like the bad toupee paradox. You know it because they want to assault you on some religious topic. It's like, why doesn't anyone like me? Because all you do is talk about Christ cucks and how much you hate church and basically screw you, dad, to God. That's all you talk about. And regular people, even other atheists, that just gets old. Like, can you talk about something else? Do you have an identity besides, I don't believe in Christ? Is there something to you beyond that? Is there something else you can talk about? Is there something interesting that you have to say to respond to a certain topic? Or can you be silent? That's another thing too. Can you be silent? There is, what's the old saying? Better to be thought fool and remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. So yes, being able to remain silent, you can change a lot of those behaviors. So having enough dignity to understand that there's not like an indelible personness to you that is always part of your behaviors, but rather your behaviors are mostly habituated, and you can change them to a large degree. That doesn't mean that you have to stop caring about the things you care about. Like, I really care about atheism or whatever it is. Okay, you can find an avenue for that that's actually maybe a little bit more positive than accosting people at a dinner party so you never get invited back. But more on the topic of dignity, people tend to not think about, oh, well, how did I get to the situation where everyone lost respect for me? How can I change that so that I don't have that happen again? Because the truth is, if people lose respect for you, that doesn't mean that you're undignified. You choose to give away your dignity based on how you respond to those things. So you can imagine a lot of us face this. If you go into work and they're like, you have to do this thing or you get fired, and it's a thing that violates your rights or violates your personhood or just reduces your dignity. Like if you're a senior software engineer and your boss says, I need you to go clean the toilets, you'd be like, that's beneath my dignity. Not that cleaning toilets removes your humanity or makes you less dignified as a human being, but you have a certain status and title that goes along with your job. And to do things that are really far, to do things that are really far beneath that is to give up your dignity. But people, because they're more afraid of losing things than they are motivated by gaining other things, they tend to sell their dignity for really cheap, often for nothing, right? How much are you selling your dignity for when you do agree to clean the toilets at your senior software developer job? Well, you're giving away, you're selling your dignity for next week's paycheck, because they can fire you anytime, right? Versus, I'm going to choose to go without and maintain 100% of my dignity and say, I'm not going to do that. And if you choose to fire me, you can. And cleaning toilets, you can put other things into that, right? Are you going to get an experimental injection? A lot of people sold their dignity for basically nothing, because they were in a position where they were so afraid of losing their job. And I really sympathize with this, that they gave up their bodily autonomy in order to keep having employment and having cash come in to pay for bills. They were afraid of that short-term pain. That's a real thing, right? A lot of people had to deal with that. A lot of people had to suffer basic indignity. But in a lot of cases, you choose to do it. And so you are presented with an opportunity to suffer or to just give up your dignity. And a lot of people will give up their dignity. You have to think about, if we want to take it to the religious realm, if you think about the passion of the Christ, when you think about Jesus, right? What did Jesus endure and what did he give up? Well, he endured every kind of bad thing that can be done to a person, every kind of thing that's intended to humiliate a person. But he never groveled, right? He never recanted anything he said. He never gave up anything. And so the fundamental dignity of his personhood couldn't be violated. And the dignity of his godhood could never be violated either. Even though the crucifixion is very much about his, the body, the person, the human nature, the human Christ suffering and dying. He doesn't lose his dignity by groveling or begging for it not to happen. And even, with the prayer, say at the Mount of Olives, like, not my will, but thine be done. I don't want this, but I will do it, So a lot of people, they'll give up their dignity for very little. I think about those like Reddit relationships, because people will really throw away everything that makes them feel good about themselves, because they're afraid of losing what they have. They're afraid of losing that relationship. When in reality, a lot of those crossroads are just realizing that the respect between those people is already gone. Your dignity is already in danger, but you don't have to give it all away completely. I mentioned the Dead Bedrooms Reddit. That's a really good example of one. And if you ever want to cruise through stories on that and maybe feel better about your own life, you can look at the Dead Bedrooms Reddit, where it's people that are trying to figure out how to cope with a marriage where they have no sexual intimacy of any kind. Like for years. We're not talking a week or a month or 6 weeks after childbirth or something. We're talking years. And how do you continue on with that relationship and maintain your dignity? And what a lot of people came down with is just like, the divorce is too costly for me to leave. And all the other options are too costly. So I choose to just basically be celibate. I choose to be a monk, because that is the only way that I can maintain my own personal love of self, my own personal dignity for myself, is to just stop trying and to give up on the idea that I have a marriage. I have a roommate, or I have a mother that I co-parent with, and that's the way that I live life. You get the idea there. So that's my whole thing about dignity. Now, the dignity of fools. You think about a fool is a person without dignity. The jester, the court jester. He's silly. He can be kicked around. He can make fun of the king. In the place where you are a comedian, you have a special area where you don't have to be dignified. You don't have to be honest. You don't have to be careful about people's feelings. You can just be ridiculous all the time. And that is really, really useful, because comedians are able to say things which are true that other people are not permitted to say, because the context of comedy gives you a layer through which you're basically allowed to say true things, because you don't have dignity. There's no dignity to be lost. from the jester, from the fool. So the fool can say basically whatever he wants. And I can't think of a better place than that than, say, Twitter right now or X right now, where you have really like the funniest people in the world are on X, cracking jokes on X. And it's because they're free to do so. They won't, get banned. They're anonymous, so they can't be suffered through a joke to lose everything. They can't be imprisoned. I just saw the guy that got locked up for a joke in 2015. He got locked up for election interference because he said Democrats can vote by text message, right? Which is obviously a joke to anyone that has an IQ above like 75, but he went to prison for this. The Biden administration locked him up. 5 years later, that happened in like 2015, and so it was 5 years later, and he actually went to prison for that. So if you're anonymous, you again have that removed. There's no danger to your dignity. You're in the space of the fool where you can be completely silly, and that's kind of what Bantha Fodder is about. Is to me just to be a chance to be silly and not be super serious. Even though I talk about a lot of serious things here, being able to have a layer where you're allowed to be ironic, you're allowed to be silly, you're allowed to be foolish. These things allow you to speak truth in ways that you normally are not allowed to say them, right? Think about racist jokes. Like, racist jokes are offensive, but when you tell a racist joke, you're communicating this. The silliness is over like the deep-seated hatred that exists between people. And we often can't talk about that honestly without making it humorous. Even something like Chappelle's Show is full of racist humor that points to actual attitudes that people have or beliefs that people have between each other. Black people about white people, for instance. Things that you often aren't allowed to just sort of say outright. But you can say them when you are acting the fool. So the dignity of the fool is that he doesn't really have any dignity to be lost. He's in a protected environment where he's almost like a disembodied voice, like on somewhere like Twitter, that's just saying the things that are funny, if that makes any sense. So being able to permit humor is huge. To me, that's a huge thing. Without humor, you're not really going to be able to say a lot of things that are true, because that Overton window is small. If you can make a joke, that can actually push the Overton window, or you can speak outside the edge of the Overton window and say things that people are really not allowed to say. You can think of like Death Camp of Tolerance, which was back from when South Park was really funny and was really doing that sort of thing, was able to present the insanity of the LGBTQ stuff where someone was trying to take advantage of that. I want to get fired. I want to be so obscene I get fired, and they refuse to fire him. They instead honor him as being a super brave homosexual or something. It's a really ridiculous episode, but it shows an attitude that you really can't talk about openly, at least in public spaces. You couldn't openly say the truth behind some of those jokes and expect to be able to keep your job and things like that. So the role of the fool and his dignity, which can't really be taken away from him because he has none, really, really important in our society too. Let's take a look at the chat, and then maybe we'll get to some other topics here. Actually, give me just a second. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Sorry. I had to go blow my nose real quick. Okay. Let's take a look at the chat, and then maybe we'll talk about some topics here. Zimimar says he's never even looked at Reddit itself. So we make a lot of jokes about Reddit and the kind of people that inhabit Reddit and the way that moderators run Reddit. So that people who basically say things they don't like, they just get banned immediately. Subreddits get shut down so people can't communicate. It's really a very converged space. But to me, what makes it funny is that because of how converged that space is, you get people who are willing to tell these stories about having no dignity. Because I feel like one of the main, one of the main parts of the ethos of the modern left, of the modern Democrat Party, is that you shouldn't have any dignity. That people don't have dignity, they don't deserve dignity, that you don't have dignity, that lacking dignity is a good thing for you. That's a lot of the message that I receive from them, which is, you need to do this. You need to give up your bodily autonomy for the good of the boomers, right? That kind of thing. There's so much to it that shows up when you stop and you really think about it. They're like, you need to buy this thing. That's another thing about dignity. So, do you have to buy the new AAA game? No, you don't. If you have dignity, you don't have to lower yourself because of fear of missing out. There are many other things to play. You don't have to lower yourself and buy the subscription to the game that you don't like and you don't want to play anymore. You can have enough dignity to not do that. Okay, so that's another one. Like when people are like, hey, have you seen the new Andor show? I'm like, no, because I have dignity. I respect myself too much to watch Andor. Why? Well, it's made by people who hate me. So why should I give them my time or attention? Why should I cover them on the channel so I get a couple of thousand views? Sorry, my dignity is worth a little bit more than that. If I'm going to sell it, I'd like to sell it for more than $50. I'd like to sell it for $1 million or something, right? I'm not gonna watch Andor and do a review. And the other thing is, if Andor is good, then no one's gonna watch the review. People will only watch the review if Andor sucks. But my bigger part is no one should be watching it who's like really feels this way about themselves. They shouldn't be watching Andor because what are you doing? You're selling your dignity for a little entertainment of Star Wars. It's not like there's a billion hours of other stuff you couldn't watch. You couldn't watch. Okay, let's pray before dinner. Atheist pops in. Actually, God doesn't exist. Why don't this is why I don't get invited to dinner parties, because I have firm beliefs and I'm not shy about them. Okay, lots of people have firm beliefs, and that doesn't mean that you have to talk about them every second of the day, especially in mixed company where not everyone is the same exact person you are. Right? You have a dinner party, maybe there's some Mormons there and there's some Catholics, and you don't need to have a debate over the Trinity over dinner, okay? You're there to talk about the ball game, or you're there to talk about business or something else, or the neighborhood, right? You don't need to have apologetics debates at dinner, but there's people who do that, and they like I said, if Vox Day were here, he'd be like, this is like the gamma male thing, is they're a little bit higher than average intelligence, but they have this behavior where they need to feel smart, so they have to one up everybody about every piece of information that comes out, rather than just letting a person talk, or really just being strategic about the way that you offer information. And especially if you're like, I want to try to persuade this person. If you decide to persuade that person, there's a lot of strategies. And ideally, not even ideally, but if you actually want to persuade a person, you're probably not going to do that by making them hate you. Like, you're not going to beat them down with hateful rhetoric to the point where they admit you're right and come over to your side of beliefs. You're actually just hardening them. So it's like, why do people hate atheists? Because of their obnoxious, terrible personalities. But in reality, because the person who identifies themselves as an atheist always puts in, that's the big part of their identity, and that's what they pursue in every conversation. So it's kind of like I've never seen a good-looking toupee. It's because the good-looking toupees you don't see. They just look like hair. It's the It's the bad ones that you see. You see the bad toupee. So it's the annoying atheists that you end up having terrible dinners with, not the normal ones who don't care about talking about beliefs which they don't have. Right? Does that make sense? It's just one of those things that you see. You sneeze. They're like, God doesn't exist. Glad to catch the stream live. I'm glad to hear you here. Gray Fox. Have you heard about the Gray Fox? They're always going on about the Gray Fox. Have you fully stopped using X? I've been meaning to DM you there, but I recall you mentioning that you were going to stop using X some time ago. I'm using it on a different account, which changes the way that you use it. So, when you have like 5,000 followers, then whenever you post on X, you're going to get a little bit of engagement because people are going to want to engage with you. Lots more people are going to see it. If you have 50 followers, chances are no one's ever going to see your comment or your post. So it actually fully removes the incentive to post. So I wanted to take a break where I could still get information from Twitter and I could still see what people were talking about, because it's a really good source for news, especially as news is happening. It's much better than trying to read the New York Times or something like that, without feeling the need to post or to try to get engagement or to try to do my business, basically, right? Because what are you thinking long term? Why do you want engagement on social media? Why do you want to do social media? Well, there's a lot of reasons that people have. Most people just enjoy using it, and that's really mostly Twitter for me, is I just enjoy using it and having the conversations there. But as a broader thing, it's part of a business, right? You want to drive up your engagement so you can monetize your X account. That's why people are posting 100 posts per day on X. It's because they're trying to get those sweet Elon bucks. Okay, that's a good reason to do it. But other people just do it because they want that little dopamine hit of somebody responded to me. It's like, I don't want that to be the reason I post the thing. And I just want to take a break from ever feeling that desire. And so that's what it did. If you have 50 followers, you just have less of a desire to post. The thing is, if you have 50 followers, you might have the same desire to post. If you've never had more than that. But if you're going from 5,000 to 50, right? It's like if I start another YouTube channel, like I have the Bantha Fodder YouTube channel, right? The Bantha Fodder YouTube channel, if I post a video on it, no one watches it. So it removes the incentive to post the video because no one's going to watch it. But it also can remove the incentive to not pull out all the stops because who cares? No one's watching anyway. That was kind of the hope with Bantha Fodder. But, 50,000 versus 50. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's me taking a break. It's just like I'm looking at stuff on an alt, mostly lurking. People don't forget the bad stuff. High school was long. Yet people can immediately recall the girls who were W's. I don't know what W means. I recall bad stuff in high school though, yeah. David, you mentioned in a previous live that you needed guiding beliefs to navigate life because the world is too complicated. You mentioned before something to the effect that the world is too complicated and unknowable, so you need guiding beliefs in order to navigate life. Can you elaborate on that? Thanks. Absolutely. Guiding beliefs, or what I call protective beliefs. So let's look at both of those, right? So a guiding belief would be just beliefs which enable you to act in a way that hopefully produces the outcomes that you want. So if you, let me think of like a really good example. If you have a good diet, you'll look a certain way. If you lift weights, eventually you'll look a certain way. These are things that you do. You have a belief that lifting the weights will improve your health. You have a belief that eating the correct food today will improve your health. Do you see that improvement immediately? You don't, but it does guide you towards a good conclusion. And you probably adopted that because other people have told you that you need to eat like that rather than just discovering it on your own. And we actually have lots of beliefs that are like that. You brush your teeth to avoid cavities. You don't brush away a cavity. So you hope that this belief will lead to a good outcome, and it usually does. But can we know every little thing that's going on, even in our mouth? Probably not. We can't see the bacteria that are in there. We can't see what they're doing. We have beliefs that are like that. So a lot of our beliefs have to do with, let's think of bigger beliefs, right? I'm going to go to school and I'm going to get a degree, and that will allow me to get a job, which will pay me money, which will allow me to buy things. It's a pretty good guiding belief. Other people lack that guiding belief, and where do they end up? If they don't believe that they should work to get money, that money happens magically, then they have a completely different set of behaviors that are derived from that belief, where money just happens to me, and they're probably living in a government project waiting for some drug score to fall into their lap where they can maybe get $5,000 and hopefully avoid jail. Totally different set of, like, say, guiding beliefs. We also have beliefs about morality, and that determines a lot about our decisions we make on the small end. Is that it's wrong to do this, so you choose to not do that, or it's good to do this, so you choose to do that. It's good to return the shopping cart. There's a lot of little beliefs that people have like that. Now, protecting beliefs is really what I'm talking about, protective beliefs. So if you have a set of beliefs, you have a model for the way the world works, because the world is too complex to know every detail of. And most of our stuff, like I said, we don't empirically adopt a diet. We take diet advice from people and then see the outcome after trying it. We don't empirically go, well, today I'm going to eat bananas and shortbread, and hopefully that will make me thin. We don't just try random foods. We usually are deriving it from pre-existing knowledge. We have a lot of things that are like that. A protective belief, though, is a thing that is like, for instance, let's talk about diet again. Like, let's say you believe in a balanced diet of 40% carbs, 40% protein, and 20% fat as a macro distribution. This is a really standard bodybuilding macro distribution. Is that ideal? Where's the science that says it's ideal? Well, you can look at science and you find that lots of different diets work for lots of people. And it's almost impossible to predict how one diet is going to work on one person. There's just kind of general trends. There's so much complexity in the human body that you just act on that belief. And if someone comes up with another belief that's like, oh, this is the diet that you got to have is lemon and sugar and raw uncooked flour and broccoli with the cow shit still on it. That's the diet that's going to get you shredded. Are you going to just adopt that because the guy who said it is shredded? No, you have a protective belief that's like, no, I believe a good diet is this thing that has given me an okay outcome, and I'm just going to continue with that. Unless there's an overwhelming preponderance of evidence that this other way of eating is going to be better than what I'm eating, what I believe is the correct thing, what bodybuilders have done, the way Mr. Olympias eat, the way Arnold Schwarzenegger eats, the way fitness athletes eat, the way that you're suggesting is better than all of that. You're going to have a really high threshold of evidence in order to convince me that I should discard my diet and do this. People have this all the time, though, because they don't have a protective belief. For instance, in diet, they're like, you got to do the carnivore diet. I'm like, well, I haven't seen any evidence that the carnivore diet is like better than the diet that every person who looks really good eats. And you're like, well, here's a person that looks really good who eats nothing but meat. And it's like, okay, so that's one person versus every fitness personality for the last 100 years, maybe longer, maybe going into antiquity. Maybe if you were to find some antique documents, you could find evidence that people still used a bodybuilding split in like ancient Greece. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if the ancient Greeks figured out, well, you need to be eating this amount of bread and this amount of meat and fish and this amount, and add only a sparing amount of olive oil. I wouldn't be surprised if like the ancients had already figured that out, because they figure out a lot of things. So maybe carnivore diet's better, but the evidence has to be really overwhelming that it's better for me to discard a regular diet, or for anyone that has that. But people will hop on fad diets because they have no protective belief about what a good diet is. I've seen it a million times. And I remember seeing it 20 years ago. The big fad was the Atkins diet, which is a low carbohydrate diet. So everyone started believing bread was bad for you and pasta was bad for you and vegetables were bad for you. And even at the time, I was like, I wasn't in great shape, but I'm like, that kind of seems like the opposite of what Arnold Schwarzenegger eats. So when I'm looking at like, how do I want to eat if I want to look like Arnold? It's not the Atkins diet. Because I remember the guy who advocated the Atkins diet, I don't remember him being fat, but I don't think he was like thin either. People had some success with the Atkins diet because it gave them a boundary that allowed them to eat that, but lots of people didn't. And because of survivorship bias, we remember the person who cut out bread and they were able to lose weight, but we don't remember the person that cut out bread and lost 5 pounds the first week and never lost weight again, or jumped off the diet because it was impossible for them to just avoid that donut or to just avoid the bread, right? So, diet is an example. We have these fad diets that come and go, and I'm sure you've seen a bunch of them on YouTube. And it's not so much whether they work or they don't work, but it's like, what's the evidence that they're going to work? It has to be it has to be really high. So anytime you have a belief and that belief is basically in a model that predicts the future accurately for you, that's good. And that will prevent you from jumping onto stupid bandwagons that could hurt you because you don't have a model, right? It just raises the level of evidence for you to be convinced of something. So it could be diet. I'm using diet as an example. It could be like an exercise routine. It's like, well, you're going to get bigger than Arnold by just like flexing your arm. You're just going to stand there and flex that arm, and you're just going to flex it, and that's how you're going to get big. It's like, but that's not what anyone who's big does. They lift weights and they do pull-ups and they move their body. So I'm going to need a lot of evidence to prove that just sitting here flexing my arm is going to make me big. Okay. I'm going to need a lot of evidence before I adopt that. And I'm not pulling that out of my ass. There are people on YouTube advocated, you don't need to lift weights. You can just do this isometric flexing exercise and this will build muscle. You just sit there and flex. You just flex and it'll build muscle. And I'm like, this seems like bullshit because no one else is doing it. Where's the evidence that you can just like flex and like just flex really hard and I'm going to get big? Where's the evidence that works? There's no evidence. But somebody who's never worked out or who's never had success working out, right? They don't have that protective belief of like, okay, I see that Chris Bumstead lifts weights and looks good. Or I see that Scooby 1961 lifts weights and looks good. He's a YouTube guy, right? I see that he does these things and he looks this way. If you don't have that, you could just jump on that thing like, oh, well, that seems easy. I'll just sit here and I'll just flex my traps. And I'm going to get big traps by flexing up my traps. And you could try that and then be like, but you'll get bored of it or it won't work quick enough and you'll jump off it. You'll forget about that belief. So in the meantime, you wasted your time. But some things could be harmful. People jump on bandwagons for like drugs. They're like, I'm going to take kratom and it's going to help me relax. And they end up in the hospital with serotonin syndrome. I know people that's happened to. Okay. So trying new drugs because of lack of protective beliefs can harm you as well. Lots of things. So a protective belief is a model for the world that works, and it just raises the evidence level required for you to change your beliefs. So when I think about religious beliefs codify a whole range of human behaviors and beliefs about human nature and things like that. And so those beliefs will stop you from just believing random crap that people tell you because a psychology study said something about it. Okay. They're not going, like if you have a certain belief about human nature being fallen, you're not going to be convinced by somebody who just says, well, people are born good and they would be good if it weren't for the bad things in the external world. Your protective belief is going to be like, I'll call bullshit on that. That's not the way human nature works. And it doesn't mean that you'll never believe it, but it's like, you're going to need a lot of evidence that like people would just be good in the absence of a bad environment, because we have people in the best possible environments and they still do bad things. So, I think the Christian view on human nature is pretty well time tested. It's pretty damn accurate in terms of predicting human behaviors, especially at scale. So that's an example of a protective belief, and the religious beliefs are full of that. What tends to happen with a lot of people in the modern age is that they adopt new beliefs because they lack those. Or let's say they decide that they're going to be an atheist. So they eject all of the beliefs of Christianity and just start filling their basket up with new beliefs, and they end up coming up with really stupid lifestyles, really horribly destructive beliefs for themselves or the way that they run their lives. This is where you get like really weird lifestyles, sexual lifestyles, crazy deviancy that destroys their lives and makes them miserable. And only later they're like, what if we had a committed relationship where we agreed to only have sex with one other person to protect ourselves from these diseases? And it's like, you just invented marriage again, which we already had. It's like, but you didn't explain it this way. You explained it as this covenant between a man and a woman, and this giver, and the God, you mentioned God, and I don't like God. And it's like, okay, maybe don't eject every belief that has made society exist. So that's really becomes the problem, is that they eject those protective beliefs and then they get convinced by anything. The threshold for believing a thing gets way lowered, because to replace one belief with another belief, you have to have a lot of evidence. If you have no beliefs, like anything can fit into that slot if you want. So most atheists that I meet, and I'm not trying to dog on atheists, I'm just talking about what I've noticed personally, is that atheists tend to have a very ad hoc view of the world. They don't have like a grand functioning model of things, unless they're like a really high level like philosophy thinker. And even then, they have to be comfortable with like, I can't explain beyond this point. If you're really honest, you're comfortable knowing that there's things you can't explain, or that there are things behind, like beyond your knowledge, and that's fine. But they tend to just throw in ad hoc beliefs. They're like, they have an ad hoc belief in environmentalism, and then they have an ad hoc belief in socialism. They tend to adopt these various pieces of the politic as kind of a replacement for religion, and then they themselves become very resistant to any evidence to the contrary. Global warming is a perfect example. Scott Adams recently has been tweeting about, and I think talking about on his live stream, nobody's talking about global warming anymore or climate change, because it's just, the base of it is falling apart. It's always been a hoax. We've known it's a hoax. I've known it's a hoax my entire life, all the way from back in the 90s. And I was lucky to have family. Again, I have family I trust. This is not a protective belief, but it's more like, oh, this thing is real. And then my uncle, like a geophysicist and geologist, is like, that is not real. Like, what? No, this is complete bullshit. There's no evidence for this. It's like, we can't even measure the temperature of the earth. And when you do measure the temperature of the earth, it's like noticing that the temperature went up in New York doesn't mean anything, because New York is where all the energy is released. It's like the temperature of New York can change for all kinds of things that have nothing to do with planet Earth whatsoever. If you put a bunch of concrete on the ground, that changes the climate of that tiny area. The temperature changes. All that stuff was, years ago. So, I wouldn't say I have a protective belief that global warming is false. More that just, I never believed it, and I've never seen enough evidence to make me believe it. And the big reason that I don't believe it is not because I have to understand intimately every climate model. And believe it or not, I took like environmental science classes and stuff where we looked at climate models. And I'm not going to say, it'd be a little too personal, but like, the predictions never came true. I've been seeing, I'm 42 now, and I was really conscious of this probably 30 years ago when I was 12, is like, none of these predictions have come true, and none of them ever are likely to come true ever. And I said this back in 2016, the problem with global warming is that it's not predictive. None of the climate scientists can accurately predict the temperature. They can't predict the weather. They can't predict the weather on the micro, and think about how hard it is to predict the weather in Houston. And then you're going to predict the weather on a global scale, pretty much impossible. So all of their predictions for where global temperatures would be, none of them worked out. The correlation between this gas and the temperature just doesn't ever seem to bear out. And so after a while, you kind of realize that, people like ClimateGate, they're altering the data. Of course, they have to alter the data to keep getting the money from the government. But none of it really bears out because of the predictive part. They can predict anything, and then time goes by, and then the thing doesn't happen, which means that your model is bullshit. So why would you believe somebody who's been lying for 30 years? If you have an entire industry that's produced all these climate models that they are never true, the predictions never come true. I don't remember who did it, but somebody like actually locked down and looked at their predictions, and the predictions are worse than random. So if in other words, worse than random means that they're like in the opposite direction more often than they are in the right direction if things were just to be random. So they're worse than random, which basically means that they're bullshit. You don't need to listen to them. You don't need to listen to their models anymore because they've never predicted things correctly. Once they create a model that correctly predicts the future, and it does so for a consistent amount of time, then maybe you can listen to them again. But you don't really need to listen to them. It's like listening to a phrenologist, which are these people who believe that like the shape of the head will determine their behavior. And if it doesn't work, if it doesn't predict anything, you don't need to analyze the details of how phrenologists measure the skull. Or you don't need to, because it doesn't predict anything. So that's where we're at with climate science. Anyway, that's my rant on that. We need episodes like that, or talk about the South Park episode. Get along, little slave. We need episodes like that more than ever, but they are doing tired wine ant pandering instead. They became wine ants. They've lived in LA for a long time. It affects you. Like you become the collective of the 5 closest people around you. Someone said that last week, and I don't know if there's any research to back that up, but it seems like a good little truism. And it certainly anecdotally bears out in my life is that the people that are around people I know, they're all kind of the average. The group kind of averages into each other. And if you enter into a group, you're going to move closer to what their average is in terms of their attitudes about pretty much everything. Drugs, sex, manner of dress, things like that. I knew people that were really normal, and then they got friends who were hippies, and then even though they became like 80% of the way to hippie. And then when those friend group dissolved, they just became normal again. Their beliefs just were fluid. They did things like make their own deodorant, and then eventually they're just buying deodorant again. And it's like, they probably just didn't think about it. They're like, well, I don't have time to make this and to like put deodorant under my arms with powder. I'm just going to buy antiperspirant and I'm just going to buy it for $3 because I have things to do. They just become normal once they leave that little group. Hey, bud, I didn't get to say this on your earlier streams, but the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I actually have some insight, finally being a Mormon who lived in Utah for a bit. There's nothing worse than a Utah ex-Mormon. I've heard this. They become the most hate my mommy daddy type and join the Reddit cult harder than they ever went to church. I have noticed this. Brian Johnson, one of my favorite personalities that I've done some content on, and thank you for the super chat. Come on, Tars. They become atheist intellects reading a couple forum posts and instantly feel to be moral arbiters of their family. It's hilarious, and they justify any and all violence against what they used to be. I have heard this, and I have anecdotally seen this as well. People who have left the Mormon church tend to really go off the deep end on whatever journey they go. Brian Johnson, I've used him as an example. He's a former Mormon. And I think that's one of the reasons that his marriage broke up was his wife was Mormon, and she's like, I'm Mormon. And he's like, I am quitting Mormonism. And it became an issue. So that was part of the reasons that they divorced, was he didn't want to be Mormon anymore. So what does he do after he becomes Mormon? He goes full techno cult, right? And to the point where he's like, I am going to start a religion. And it's like, okay, once you eject all of those protective beliefs, your mind is unbarred, it's ungated, people can come in, you can put in whatever beliefs you want. His belief that he decided to replace Mormonism with is scientism, which is like science can tell us things. And I've pointed out a lot of the flaws in his thinking, the big one being that there's a study that says this thing is good for you. And if you do all the good things, you'll basically lengthen your life incredibly. It's like, nope. What it really is that avoiding the bad things, like bad things shorten what would be your normal maximum lifespan. And if you avoid all the bad things, you have a better potential to reach your maximum lifespan. That doesn't equate to higher maximum lifespan. You can't eat the right amount of dark chocolate and weird food and red light and replacing blood or God knows whatever else weird things he does and have you live longer because of it. Like, you're not going to be like, well, I'm doing this and I'll go from living from 95 to 100. Doesn't work that way. All right. No one's living past 120. Like, we could get the best medicine ever. Like, 120 is pretty much going to be your hard limit unless you're able to replace major body systems like the vascular system, which is a little too complex to try to replace right now. I have a bone anchored hearing aid. I could replace some of my hearing, but it's like the complexity of the ear can't be replaced. It can't just and we do have cochlear implants and things like that, but you can't replace like the heart. I heard that they have like a mechanical heart that worked for a while. Like, a guy was able to use it. Maybe you could replace the heart, but arteriosclerosis affects the entire cardiovascular system. So you'd have to replace all your veins and arteries. I think Brian would probably be okay with like putting his head in a jar, or like uploading his consciousness into a computer. And that's avoiding the problems of the body failing. You are your body. I went over that last time. So he's a really good example of that, even though he's thinking very positively and he has a positive motivation for it. It's the same thing, and you see it over and over again. Now, Mormons do it. Anyone, I would say the people who do this, it's not just Mormons. Your experience is Mormons, and Mormons are a big part of it, I think, because other people will call Mormons a cult, or Mormonism a cult. It's a religion. They want to make a difference between a cult and a religion. We don't need to wade into that morass, but they think like, if you leave the Mormon religion, it's going to be like Jehovah's Witnesses. Everybody has to ostracize you and stuff like that. So you have to be really hardened in your belief against the Mormon church if you're going to leave it. You have to be really hardened. And so you're going to go to the places that are going to help you harden those beliefs. They're going to say the things like, Mormons are bad and they're evil and you're good. And have you gotten the new Bad Dragon dildo and shoved that up your ass? I have. And Mormons are bad. And I'm in a quad-way polyamorous relationship with Dragonkin, who slammed those bad dragons up my butt, right? This kind of thing happens because your mind's, you have to reinforce that. And the people who tend to reinforce it the hardest are the most deviant. If you want to have an extremely deviant lifestyle, obviously most religions are going to object to you having that. So you have to be really hardened against it. But it's the same thing. Like, I've known former Baptists, former evangelicals tend to really go hard on this because evangelicalism can get very cult-like in that sense. It can get very into what's your emotional experience? Aren't you feeling the Holy Spirit? A lot of what I might call like charismatic kind of stuff. So people that were former charismatics, they grew up Pentecostal, they tend to go really hard into the atheism thing when they leave the church. And a lot of them come back around to like a more mainline belief, believe it or not, later in their lives. So I've met lots of people. It's like, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and I had to leave Jehovah's Witness, and I was an atheist, and I thought it was all bad. And then eventually came back around and joined the Catholic Church. They come back around to a more mainline belief than some of these more extreme beliefs. Now, this makes me think about Viktor Frankl's philosophy. No matter what indignities are inflicted upon you, you have agency over your response, even in just choosing what to believe. That's true. That's true. So the whole Mormon thing, I've seen that many times. The former Mormons that I've known tend to really go off the deep end with that kind of stuff. They tend to leave hard, tend to be pretty hard about it. I've known a couple that left the Mormon church that just became normal, kind of everyday agnostic types. They just didn't really believe. They just kind of went on with their life. They stopped going to church. They stopped doing believing the temple thing, But the bigger problem with a lot of people doing that is that if your family really expects you to do that, they can ostracize you. They can be like, you can't be here because you don't believe the same things that we do. People will do that. People will definitely do that. There's also like fundamentalist Latter-day Saints groups, which are like basically little cults that live out in the Utah and Colorado mountains. And, they practice like plural marriage and, this stuff from like the 19th century. We got to go back to like the 19th century, 10 wives kind of thing. And that's very cult-like. They don't want people to leave. They don't let people leave. Sadly, I think many people were robbed of their dignity in their youth, or their parents didn't model dignity for them. Yeah. So think about, if you're in school, a lot of times the punishment, I shouldn't say a lot of times. Sometimes the punishment is there to remove your dignity. You have to write an essay on why you were wrong. Oh, that's like something you make prisoners of war do. That's a hypnosis technique to make them write an essay about why they're wrong. Whoever writes the best essay on why communism is right gets double rations tonight. Atheism is attracted to evade responsibility because it's deterministic. You have to believe you can choose to believe in order to believe. I don't really follow that. I think most atheists, they just are, maybe we call them agnostic. Like they firmly believe that there's no God, but they don't follow a track of beliefs. They're not thinking about this stuff deeply or philosophically. They're like, I just don't believe in it. And they do things that their model of protective beliefs or functional beliefs probably just work, right? Like they know to work hard and they get money and they can buy food, right? They're not going off the deep end, and they're also not spending their time, like I said, they're not spending their time at a dinner party talking about why Christ cucks are so stupid. And, when you're writing, how do you handle the situation where there's something that you want to express or describe, and you know what it is that you can't find the right words? I just write with the words that I know and worry about finding the precise words later when I'm editing. I just write with the words that I know. It's better, what's more important with prose in particular is that it's functional and accurate, not that you're using super precise words. So like you can, let's say you want to describe, you want to describe a river of a modest size, and you're like, there's a word for that, and it's not creek. I'm just going to call it a small creek. And then later you're reading and you're like, oh, a brook. A brook. That's a good word for it. So just write with the words you know, and you can use those adverbs and adjectives. You can modify it. It's a small creek. It's a small hill. It's a large rock rather than a boulder. It's a boulder of immense size rather than a carrack. It's some rapids in the river rather than a cataract. It's a small waterfall rather than a cataract, right? You can use, when someone reads small waterfall, they're pretty much going to think of a cataract. They don't really have to think of those, you know what I mean? Anyway. Isn't the Gray Fox also the ninja from Metal Gear? I don't know. Gray Fox is in Elder Scrolls. And he's actually the Count of Anvil. But no one remembers him. Because by taking on the identity of the Gray Fox, people only know you as the Gray Fox, which is cool. When you finally get the Cowl of Nocturnal and you can become the Gray Fox, you can do all kinds of funny things in this game. So you can put on the cowl and murder people, and the infamy goes to the Gray Fox. It's literally like a different person. So if you let's say you have done the Thieves Guild thing and you don't want to gain infamy because you're going to keep wearing like the Crusader gear from the Knights of the Nine expansion or plugin or whatever it is. So you put on the Gray Fox cowl and then you kill a dude and the murder goes to him. I haven't tried this yet, but I may try it on another playthrough. Is like putting on the cowl and murdering a guy to trigger the Dark Brotherhood and seeing if Lucien LeChance will talk to you if you don't have the Cowl of Nocturnal on. That would be an interesting test. I learned not to provide information opinions without being asked to at some point in middle school. Still up from that time to time with unpleasant results. I will give them when I think they're relevant and helpful, and that's when I do it. So I give a lot of opinions, but usually when I think they're relevant or it's part of the conversation, right? It's like if we're talking about stocks and like, I'm thinking about buying this stock, and I'm like, well, I heard a thing and maybe this information will be useful for you. I don't just withhold it until they go, what do you think about this stock? And be like, well, I heard this. Do you think I should buy more Tesla? I heard there's an AI bubble. That's what I heard. This is crooked. It's throwing me off. This is a map from one of my novels, by the way. I'll link it. I haven't linked a book in a while. Oh boy. Needle Ash. Where's Needle Ash? Complete edition. Here it is. You can read it. And it's good. Let's see here. W equals promiscuous girls. Whores. You can just say whores. Or I was thinking witches? Like whores. I can't keep up with what the censor bot approves of. Okay. Maybe you can't write whore. I can say whore. I'm pretty sure I can say whore. Prostitute. Slut. Loose women. Women of loose morals. Protected beliefs like right to choose to justify abortion. That is one, right? How are you going to get over their belief that, like, you have to have such a huge amount of evidence to get over that? In fact, I actually think that that's a demonic belief, but that's why they get obsessed about it. I learned after my wife kept rolling her eyes when I tried solving the problem. Now I just complain along with her. Sometimes, and here's the thing, I'll just give you a piece of like personal advice. Sometimes people just want you to hear them. They just want someone to share in how they're feeling. They want someone to acknowledge that they're experiencing something bad. And they just want someone to say, man, that sucks. Is there anything I can do? You know, not to offer a solution. Maybe they're like, here's the problem. Do you know any solutions? That's when you're like, well, maybe this, or maybe you can look here. You know, and sometimes people just need to be able to have another ear to listen to to share this, to know that another human being can see or experience this thing that you're trying to talk about, that it's not completely internal. Being able to tell the difference between that is pretty important. A lot of times people just want to vent and not be told what the solution is. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, the eggs are bad for you, right? Eggs are bad for you, except every like fitness guy ate a ton of eggs. And they just ignored that advice and kept eating eggs. I was always pretty sure, as a non-scientist, that climate change was goofy, especially when they said I'd have to give all my wealth to the government to solve it. Yeah. What's the solution? Well, the solution is socialism. How will that solve the problem of global warming? Like, does socialism mean less pollution, less industrialization? No, more. In fact, the communist countries are the biggest polluters in the history of planet Earth. Okay. Right. I love the global cooling ad that Leonard Nimoy did back in the 70s. So yes. So they believed in global cooling. Now, where did the global cooling thing come from? Well, we're putting soot up in the air, like we're putting particles up in the air that reflect the sun. And because more sun's being reflected away from the earth, it's going to lower the temperature of the earth. And by lowering the temperature of the earth, we're going to enter a phase of cooling where it gets colder and colder and colder, and there's more and more snow, which reflects more and more sun, and you get a runaway snowball effect. That didn't happen. So the other one was global warming. The ice caps will melt. We'll have a runaway, will become a Venusian hothouse. That didn't happen either. And the other thing is, like, we're looking at 100 years in geologic terms. That's a really, really short amount of time. When we're looking at the geological history of the United States, we're talking, or not the United States, the entire world. There are drastic climate changes that happen, but it's like thousands of years. You know, there are climate changes that happen, but the stuff where like the polar ice caps will melt, it's like, it's probably not going to melt this year, you know? And they show videos like, here's ice falling off the shelf. It's like, yeah, how does ice fall off the Antarctic shelf? Well, it's pushed off by other ice behind it. That's the way that works. That's the way these glaciers work. The glaciers move towards the sea. Someone explained that to me. I'm like, oh, why do they keep showing that? It's like, because they want you to feel, they want you to see and feel. Like, showing an image that makes you see and feel is going to be more powerful than explaining, well, you know, there was 1 inch less of snow in Antarctica this year. Isn't that concerning? It's like, well, how many inches of snow do they get? They get, like 1,000. It's like, okay. Or, you know, maybe it's not 1,000. It's like, 200 inches of snow. We got 1 inch less. It's a trend or something like that. And you're like, oh, okay. So maybe it's not something we need to worry that much about, or maybe it's less drastic. Or like they show the glaciers falling off and someone's like, well, they're falling off because that polar ice cap's growing. That part of the ice cap is getting thicker right now. Oh, interesting. How long before leftists go after you? I don't know. I mean, they've tried in their own mean way. So I talked about this last time, maybe 2 weeks ago. You may not be a big enough target for somebody to want to take the risk of trying to murder you. But you shouldn't write off people trying to hurt you in smaller, mean ways. So I could see getting CPS called on me. Right? If someone had my address or knew enough info about me, having CPS get called on me, even by my family, because they don't like my beliefs. I have extended family that are so hardened with their political beliefs, they would try to punish me for having them, and they would justify it like this. And I've seen people actually write this is like, voting for Trump is child abuse. Therefore, you're completely in the clear for calling CPS on someone who voted for Trump. And you're not only in the clear, you're obligated to, because it's evil. It's a child abuse. They're setting their children up to be destroyed or not be allowed to cut their dicks off later. Can you imagine a terrible world where this person's children are not allowed to cut off their own dicks? Pay a doctor to cut their dick off, paid for by the U.S. government? Better send CPS after him. So yeah, having CPS called on you, having people maybe try to do like a real estate scam, try to steal your deed. So that's a thing that happens, at least in Texas. I hear about it. I know it happens in other states, maybe in California, is that people will do a deed scam. If they know where you live and they know anything about you, they can figure out how to fake a notary and get a title signed over to themselves and then sell your house to like a BlackRock or something. So then BlackRock shows up and they're like, this is our house. And you're like, no, it's not. And it's like, we have the title. And you're like, no, you don't. And then you have to spend $30,000 fighting it in court. Lots of ways that people can hurt you and do it with a relatively low risk place, a place where they can't be harmed in return. So for someone to come after you trying to murder you, they put themselves in a very risky place. You think about your home. Your home is likely not very secure. I know my home, maybe you probably can't see it, but like I have a front door. I have windows. The windows can be broken, right? The door can be broken open. It's right. Most homes are not secure. They're very insecure. So why don't you have people breaking through your windows and coming into your home to kill you all the time? Because you are there. And so because you're there and you possibly have a gun, that doesn't happen. The risk is high enough to be symmetrical that people don't just try to barge into homes where somebody could kill them. There's a small amount of risk. Okay. If we look at Charlie Kirk as an example, what's the risk? Obviously the assassin took a huge risk and he's probably going to be, hopefully get executed for what he did. So major risk, major reward of killing someone that they view as very important, someone very persuasive that makes people believe the things that they think are evil. So the risk to reward is a little higher there. And plus they chose to do it in a place where Charlie couldn't fight back. It was a gun-free zone. So you choose the place where you're best able to execute that with the lowest amount of risk. But even with something as high risk as an assassination, they view it as worth it because of Charlie Kirk's notoriety. So the difference between Charlie Kirk is not his beliefs. It is how popular he was. Your beliefs are the same. They would kill you if you were as popular as he was. But the risk doesn't work out. You have to think that most people are cowards. They just are. And that's going to guide a lot of what they do. So if they can call CPS to get your kids taken away, and that's not going to hurt them, then they'll do that because they're not going to come confront you. You could hurt them. And people who aren't cowards, maybe you're just good at assessing risk too. I'm not going to go over there and like possibly be shot to death. I'll just call CPS and have his kids taken away. I'll run a scam on him. I'll send him pizzas. You do all of the little mean phone pranks. So those are the things that you can probably expect. Back in 2015, I had people threaten to kill me. I've had death threats a bunch of times. I've had a lot of death threats. A lot for me. I'm used to 0 death threats. Getting online death threats was a really new thing for me in 2015. I had people calling my work trying to get me fired. I had lots of people doing very mean things. None of them worked, but that doesn't mean they didn't try. And the reason they tried is because they felt like there was no risk for them. Okay. The death threats, nothing ever happened because most people are cowards and not going to come after me, or anyone really, because they just don't feel like it's important enough or they don't want to die. They're not really willing to risk their life. If they could send you an online death threat to make you scared, to make you shut up, then they'll do that if they feel like it's low risk. And so you get anonymous death threats sometimes. That happens. They want you to shut up. They want you to get scared and shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up or I'll kill you. And we've killed other people. We could kill you too. You're probably not going to come after and kill me because of the risk. They're swatting. I forgot about swatting. Tim Pool says he gets swatted regularly. Major streamers, they get swatted all the time. You have to be in touch with like the local police to know that chances are someone calling and pretending to be you it's a swatting attempt. It's a swatting attempt. So those are the things you can expect. And maybe someone will try to swat me. Who knows? I haven't had a swatting attempt yet. I learned about the eggs being bad for you thing, and I remember how they kept changing what it was every week, it seemed. First, it was brown eggs are bad and white eggs and so on and so on. I remember it was like the cholesterol in eggs, and then it was the saturated fat in eggs, because it turns out dietary cholesterol doesn't actually like really affect your blood cholesterol, but the saturated fat might affect your blood cholesterol, but then it turns out you need saturated fat because you actually need one kind of blood, like the science on cholesterol is kind of all over the place, and kind of hard to nail down. And it's changing all the time. And the whole thing about eggs is like a lot of people gave up salt. Salt was bad for you for a while too. People stopped eating salt because they thought salt would raise your blood pressure. And it does if you have a crap ton of it. But people can drink or people can consume a crap ton of salt and not have it do anything. Your kidneys get rid of all the extra salt. Ancient people ate salt in huge amounts because that was the way that you preserved food, and it didn't kill them. And in fact, if you don't have enough salt, you're going to have major problems performing athletically. You're going to get cramps and stuff. So you got to have salt. Salt is like mandatory. But for a while, salt was bad. Stop putting salt on your food. It's going to raise your blood pressure. High blood pressure is the silent killer. Turns out high blood pressure, and I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, so take this with a grain of salt. My thing that I notice whenever I'm looking at this thing is bad for you from some study, some medical study, are they controlling for obesity? Because almost always these things are like, this is bad for you. And you're like, is it bad for you? Or is it that being obese is bad for you? It's like eating bacon is bad for you. Okay. I could see that. But is me eating a piece of bacon every other day very bad for me? Or is it eating the people who eat like, who are 900 pounds and eat a shit ton of bacon, right? Which people are we talking about here? And it's the same thing. Saturated fat is bad for you. Is it? Like, I'm not eating a ton of saturated fat ever, right? But maybe it's bad for me, but how much? How much dosage is actually bad for you? Well, these people had increased incidence of heart attack. Well, were they obese? So you find a lot of things that's like, this thing is bad, and it really is just pointing to obesity bad. I remember one with like, people who drink diet soda are more likely to be overweight. It's like, yeah, they're trying to lose weight. So the overweight people are trying to cut calories. That's why they're drinking the diet soda. They have it completely reversed. It's just, you're just looking at obesity. It's the same thing with like, why are poor people more likely to have heart disease? They're fatter. Why are black people more likely to have heart disease? They're fatter on average. Probably because they're poorer on average, right? And at least in the United States, if you're poor, you're fat. And so all the things, people in poverty have all of this lower lifespan. How much of that is them being fat? Probably a lot of it, right? So I've noticed this with a lot of them. Like, let's look deeper at the study. Okay, so this is a study about how being fat is bad for you. It's like, did you know that drinking alcohol is bad for you? Yeah, I knew that. And it's like, it causes this heart problem. I'm like, is that just fat people who happen to drink 8 beers a day? You know, a lot of it is that. But we know alcohol is bad for you and all that stuff's bad for you. But a lot of cases you're looking at this thing is bad. It's like obesity is bad for you. Remember when the world's gas supply was supposed to run out? Yeah, peak oil. We've been hearing, oops, I spilled my drink a little bit. We've been hearing about peak oil for like 30, 40 years. Peak oil never happened, and peak oil would have to happen before we can really start to run out of oil. Not that we shouldn't pursue alternative energy sources. I'm going to get a towel to clean this up. I'll be right back. Right back. I'm cleaning up the spill. I forgot to turn the mic off. All right. Should I show off the kitten for a minute or see how it can stand? All right. All right, check out this guy. Check out this little guy. We got a new kitten. Here he is. His name is Merlin Octavius. Little Merlin Octavius. Are you going to play with that? Okay. Is this a toy? Little toy. Little toy for a sweet kitten. Whoa. He is a ragdoll. He's a little ragdoll cat. Isn't he cute? And you can give him pets and hugs. Are you wanting to go play again? Okay. What a sweet little guy he is. Here, let me get him close to the camera. Look at that beautiful cat. Look at the camera, buddy. There you go. Good boy. Good boy. Okay, let me take you back. All right. The AI Gore documentary. If climate change isn't real, why are insurance companies fleeing Miami? I haven't heard about that. It's been a very weak hurricane season this year, knock on wood. And this always happens. And actually, they're like, oh, there's more storms, and then there's not more storms. You know, insurance companies may leave an area not because there's more. I mean, Miami's Miami. It's in an interesting place, but for other reasons too, right? It's like they are not allowed to charge a high enough premium. That can happen. Generally, if you can insure someone in a profitable way, you will, but the thing is, like, how much premiums are you really like allowed to charge? I think I got some drink in my mouse. Guys, I'm going to have to buy a new mouse. Uh-oh. I'm going to have to buy a new mouse, huh? Let's see if it works. Oh, my scroll wheel is not working anymore because I spilled my drink into it. Dignity or pride? So they're both. Let's say, it could be both. Pride is something that you feel good about your actions. Dignity is like more about being worthy of respect. Being worthy being worthy of respect is probably a good way of putting it. A worthiness to dignity. But you can lose both, right? You can lose both your pride and your dignity. So think about the OnlyFans girl who gives up her dignity for less than $50 a month. And you also have to deal with the pride that, like, nobody wants to pay to see me naked. That's a huge check to your pride. If I publish a book and no one reads it, that can affect my pride, but it doesn't affect my dignity. If I publish a bunch of nudes, I'm imagining I'm a hot girl. If I publish a bunch of nudes and nobody wants to see them, you're losing your pride and your dignity. A lot of the time you were punished for having dignity in school too. I once fought back against a bully. If it hadn't been for the fact that it was winter break, both of us were going to be suspended. Yep, they used to do that. Be a punching bag or else you get punished too. And chances are the person who punches you doesn't really get punished either. And if the narration is in a character's point of view, you're not going to be using $5 words. Unless they're trying to sound smart, which is a whole different thing. That's true. We're talking about functional prose. To me, functional prose, it's more important that it exists and it communicates the idea clearly than it's like got beautiful choices of words, I guess. Just don't mention a farm implement on YouTube. I just had to learn to listen instead of fix problems. I'm like way behind on the chat. Did you see that Emmanuel Macron's wife said that she's going to provide photographic evidence that she's in fact a woman? They're suing Candace Owens for defamation. And I'm like, no one wants to see this. Can't you do a DNA test? It's because the DNA test would be maybe too conclusive versus, I'm a woman because look at this vagina. People look at it and they're like, that shit ain't real. That is one of those man-made horrors that Tesla warned us about. That's what we're looking at. And then you have to have an argument. I mean, maybe you have a legal argument. It's like, how are we defining a woman? You define it by these characteristics, and she clearly has all those characteristics. Therefore, she's a woman, and it's like, but we've just carved her body into the shape of a woman. Maybe, the trial may have to have a real question of what is a woman. We're not providing DNA. Look at the photo. And then you have an expert that's up there. It's like, as an expert in post-op transgender women, that is a carven vagina. That's the result of a vaginoplasty and a neovagina that's been made using a piece of intestine. It's good work. I'll admit it's good work. But a connoisseur like myself can tell the difference between that and the real thing. And the jury's like, huh. Can we see some more examples of the real thing? For comparison, we might need some Might need to see it live. All I'm saying. It's easy to spot fake boobs. I imagine it'd be easier to spot a fake bagoo. Let's see if we get something good here. Stop global warming. Start global cooling. Burn, baby, burn. It came after your Force Awakens review, didn't it? People usually get nuts about movie reviews. It's Star Wars. It's particularly Star Wars. Star Wars replaces a huge part of their identity. So when you come out and say this thing sucks, and here's the reasons why it sucks, and you just get hurt, I guess. It's like this person, and of course they come up with a bunch of things, like this person's a homophobic, bigot, xenophobic, blah 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 blah. They just come up with a bunch of names. Like this person must exist in enemy categories because he didn't like the movie. And all I really talked about was how it sucked on a technical level. I really didn't talk about the political part of it at all. The political part of it might have inspired it behind the scenes, but it mostly was just a really poorly done movie. It had a terrible plot, really bad characters, and really ruined Star Wars. That's all. Same thing with Last Jedi. Last Jedi was like the bandwagon. Everybody finally realized that the new Star Wars sucks. I think Last Jedi was better than Force Awakens, like very much so. It's just a better made movie, but it was still bad and still had a nonsense plot and really bad characters. I think people kind of openly saw more of the like political subtext of what Rian Johnson was doing. So it's fine. I still can't believe one of my high school teachers you had people try to get you fired over Star Wars. Luckily, like, no one took it seriously. Yeah. Ice cream. I remember all the crap years ago about how ice cream was bad. I mean, ice cream is bad for you in quantity. Like, most things are either good or bad. Like, most things are good for you in a correct quantity. Like, you hear this about coffee. Coffee is good for you because it has these flavonoids and like it has these antioxidants, which are good for you. Okay. So there's a difference between drinking a cup of coffee in the morning and getting those flavonoids and drinking 20 cups of coffee and having to go to the hospital. Okay. There's a difference between those, and having your blood pressure be like, 160 over 110 because of how much caffeine you have. So there's a difference. The correct amount, that's the thing about like the carnivore diet is like, you need enough protein to do this. It's like, and we always believe, your most of your energy comes from carbohydrates. That's like that's your fuel to move. And it's like, yes, you can get fuel to move by burning protein. You totally can, but is that the best performance? I don't know any performance athletes that are carnivores. There might be a couple that are out there, but most of the performance athletes you see, what do they have? They have a really high carb diet. So if carbs are terrible for you, why do the people in the best health eat a lot of carbs? It's because they're bad for you in the wrong quantities. If you're eating a box of donuts, that's obviously going to be bad for you. If you're eating a whole bag of sugar, obviously it's going to be bad for you. But if you're eating, bread, piece of, like, I don't know, I home bake my bread. I'm crunchy. Bread's not, a piece of bread is not bad for you. It's bad for you if it's in the wrong quantity. You don't eat a whole loaf of bread, but you can eat a piece of bread. You can have a sandwich. Yeah, safe and effective. I've never seen a skinny person drink Diet Coke. He drinks Diet Coke. I have seen tons of skinny people drink Diet Coke, including me when I was shredded. I drink Diet Coke all the time. Okay. I've known, there's fitness personalities on YouTube. They're drinking that Coke Zero. Louis Marco would drink that Coke Zero. Coach Greg drinks Coke Zero or whatever. Yeah. Diet soda's great. It fills you up. It tastes great. As a substitute for a sweet soda, it's a really good substitute because no calories, no problem. So there's tons of fit, skinny people who drink Diet Coke. Tons of them. But if you're looking at like who's who's more likely to choose the Diet Coke? It's the person who's worried about their calories. That's why I drink it. If I drink regular Coke, I actually can't drink regular Coke because it makes me sick to my stomach, the corn syrup. I can't have corn syrup. Like, I know this is probably, there's going to be someone that's like, corn syrup is the same. No, it's not. Corn syrup makes me sick. Real cane sugar soda, I can drink that. But if there is corn syrup in that shit, I'm going to have a tummy ache. I recently saw an ad where a clinician claims smoothies are poison. Interesting. I'm still having smoothies in the summer in moderation until there's evidence, as you say, I'm not going to pay attention. It's all quantity. I remember people would drink Jamba Juice. They go get a 32-ounce Jamba Juice thing, drinking that, right? And they're like, it's good for you because it's got all this vegetables or fruits in it. It's got all this stuff in it that's good for you. Therefore, it's good for you. And I'm like, it's probably not bad for you, but I mean, you're drinking, I think we figured it out one time that like the 32-ounce Jamba Juice was like 800 calories, the one that they were drinking. So it's like, that's a lot. You know, you're drinking like 5 oranges in that smoothie and a bunch of other stuff. Or the people who had the lemongrass smoothie, they were still drinking like 400 calories worth of smoothie. And it's like, that's not bad. Like 400 calories is not bad. 400 calories is bad if you have way too many calories anyway. You know, I knew people that were obese that drank Jamba Juice all the time and they thought it was good for them. And maybe it's because they just didn't have an idea of how many calories they were consuming in a day is what I really think it is. I think most people who are just overweight or maybe moderately obese, they just aren't thinking about how much energy goes into their body. They're just not really tracking it, even in an estimate kind of way. And not like I'm counting my calories because I'm on a diet, but they're not even thinking like, well, you know, I already had a hamburger today, so I should probably eat something a little bit light for dinner, you know, maybe have a salad, which a normal person would think that way. Or a normal person, actually, I think if they went to like Chili's for lunch, they would just like not eat dinner. They're like, I'm still full from Chili's, man. I'm still full from Chili's. Whereas I think an obese person is just, I'm hungry. I'll eat something else again. And they just don't really think about it. And so part of learning good diet habits is knowing, okay, it's not that orange juice is bad for you, but a bottle of orange juice, like, a big glass of orange juice can be 200 or 300 calories. That's a lot of calories for orange juice. So unless you're just not eating a lot of other stuff, maybe it's better to have the diet soda instead of the orange juice. And then you'll lose a little bit of weight, you know, just take the orange juice out and have something else, and I kind of think of it as like, I don't drink regular soda because if I drink a regular soda, that's 200 calories. I don't drink beer for the same reason. 200 calories of beer. I'd rather have a cookie. I'd rather have a cookie than the soda. So it's just like, what treat do I want today? Do I want a soda or a cookie? And I'm like, I want a cookie. I like the cookie better. So I'm going to have the cookie instead of the soda. But like I said, I think a lot of people who are overweight, they just don't think. They're not actively thinking about what they're eating all the time. They don't have a diet mindset. So it's really easy to overeat. And I think it's really forgivable. It's really easy to eat too much good tasting food. There's a lot of it out there and it's very cheap. Some of the most obese people I know personally are very conscious of their gluten consumption. Well, if you have a gluten allergy, it doesn't matter whether you're thin or obese, it will cause major problems. I know because my wife can't eat gluten. And if she were to eat gluten, it's potentially like a trip to the emergency room. Potentially. It could be that bad. Usually gluten exposure is not that bad, but it's potentially very bad. So it wouldn't matter. She's not fat. She's skinny, but like it wouldn't matter. She has to focus on it because it's like an allergy. It's like a person could be fat or skinny and not be able to eat peanuts. But I think a lot of people choose to be gluten-free because they think, they think gluten, again, if you have a protective belief, maybe you won't jump on that bandwagon, but they think gluten causes inflammation or something and, things like that. And it could. Who knows? I don't know for sure. I don't know if gluten may cause inflammation in you. I don't know. I know it doesn't in me. I can eat as much gluten as I want. But I say that, I'm thinking, how much gluten do I really eat? And I'm like, I don't really eat that much. I had like protein pancakes for breakfast. I had like a little mini taco on like a naan bread. So I've had flour today. I've had gluten today. But it's not like I'm eating huge amounts of bread all the time. Just not. I'm going to spend time getting my snowblower ready for winter. The winter Gore promised wouldn't come. It snowed in Houston last year. I can't believe it. Climate change. And it's like, occasionally tail end events happen. That's the problem with a lot of climate change stuff, is like anytime there's a tail event, it's climate change, right? You can't just have exceptional events happen as part of cycles, right? It has to be climate change. There's a heat wave, it's climate change. There's a cold wave, it's climate change. No one in 1850 had a cold snap and think, maybe we're burning too much coal, you know? But that's what it is. Anything can be attributed to climate change. But if it's good, no one, it's not attributed to anything. It's like, wow, we've had I went to California over the summer. They had an unusually cool summer over in Central California. Normally it's 100 degrees every day. It's hot as hell. We got there. It was never like above 85. It cooled off into the 60s at night. It was beautiful in Central California. And it had been like that most of the summer. That's really nice. Isn't that the climate change we want? Don't we want it to be nice and cool in Central California? Nice and cool, you know? No, it's climate change when it's 115 in Fresno, but when it's 85 in Fresno, no one notices or thinks about it. They're like, well, this is nice. We should point that out. Yes, the kitty. His name is Merlin Octavius. He's about 4 or 5 months old, maybe. Yeah. Gore said Mount Kilimanjaro's lack of snow on its cap was proof global warming was real. It melts during the summer. The Cascades do the same thing here in Washington during the summer. Yep. And the coastal mountains in California and the hills up in Texas. You know, same thing happens in the Appalachians. The Sierra Nevadas have snow all year round, but they're exceptionally tall mountains. Mount Kilimanjaro is in, where is that? Isn't that in Africa? Insurance companies flee likely due to so many people equals more accidents and weather hazards Florida faces. Yeah, but you can always charge higher premiums was my thing, right? So there's usually some other thing where they have to cover something, or they can't charge more, or like they can't increase premiums enough to stay in business, and if they do, people will quit, and they won't have a large enough insurance pool to insure that area. Because the other thing is like, in order to run an insurance business, many people have to pay in and few people have to take out. And so if you don't have enough people in the pool, insurance doesn't work out. You got to get more people in the insurance pool. Sounds like most scientific medical studies published just come to these roundabout and false conclusions from obfuscated or bad data. You can look up p-value hacking. People have done a lot of work on p-value hacking and how that works. I learned a lot of this stuff when I was in graduate school, that most published research is false. You can just Google most published research is false. You'll find a scholarly paper on why most published research is false. And that can communicate a lot of what's going on. Most people don't think that way. They're like, oh, well, science, there's a published research thing. Science says this is real. And then another one that does the opposite, or just never replicates. So it's just false. It just never has mattered. That's the way it is. Sounds like most, yes. Blue is out. Yellow will be the next protective tarp color. Influencers are saying Mandalorian and Grogu is going to save Star Wars. Of course. They've been saying that for 5-6 years or whatever. It's all they say. Every time Disney releases something new in Star Wars, it's the thing that saves Star Wars. My question is, what do they think it's being saved from after all this time? When I was consuming too much high fructose corn syrup, I developed a bad thought. When I finally made the connection and stopped having any HFCS, the cough. Oh, the coughing stopped. A cough, yeah. I think high fructose corn syrup it doesn't work for me. Coke is changing back to pure sugar like Mexican Coke is now. So I'm going to tell you why companies use high fructose corn syrup. It's cheap. And the reason it's cheap is because we don't make enough sugar in the United States. The United States, due to its climate, is not a big sugar producer. Sugar is a lower yield, higher. It doesn't yield as much profit per acre trying to grow sugar cane in the areas we can, like Florida and, Texas and Alabama and stuff. So if we were to import cane sugar from Central America, all the Coke would just have regular sugar in it because it'd be very cheap. The only reason high fructose corn syrup is in everything is because it's so expensive. Like sugar is just expensive. So it's either you pressure them to have less profit by putting real sugar in the soda, or you make sugar cheaper. And so in this case, the way to make sugar cheaper would be either two paths: make it cheaper to grow sugar here rather than growing sugar beets, or find ways to encourage cane sugar to be growing. I don't know. I don't know all the ins and out of ag right now and ag subsidies, but there's probably ways to do it. Or to allow foreign countries to import their sugar without a lot of sugar tariffs. Sugar tariffs are very high. So sugar is a good example of how tariffs can impact the whole ecosystem in ways that people don't really think, is that because sugar tariffs are high, to protect the home sugar beet business, you have high fructose corn syrup and everything. So the poisonous HFCS, high fructose corn syrup, is a result of sugar tariffs. Get rid of the sugar tariffs. Trump, I know you're into tariffs. Let's get rid of the sugar tariffs. It's a matter of health. Let's get rid of the sugar tariffs. We don't have a great climate for growing sugar cane, but Brazil can grow all of our sugar for us and all of the sugar for them. And that will help those farmers, and we'll have cheap sugar, and the Coke will taste better, and we'll be healthier. And the other thing about other people have described why high fructose corn syrup is bad for you in other ways, in that it doesn't provoke the same insulin response. So it creates less satiety. You're less satisfied when you have high fructose corn syrup compared to real sugar. Yeah. It's usually my dinner time now, but I'm just not hungry, so I must wait. Yeah. I still have the itis from my sushi at lunch. Body said that was quite enough. Time to digest for the next few hours. I drink beer. It's probably my worst dietary decision. I did do what was essentially a carnivore diet, some very low carb veg for 2 months, and I'll say it was definitely good for me. The other thing about low carb is that people hop on the low carb diet, they pay attention to the scale, they drop 10 pounds, maybe even 15 really fast. And they're like, man, this is working great. And then it plateaus off. And what happened? Well, your initial drop was partly because you were lowering your calories, but it was mostly that your body was using up its carbohydrate stores, and as it uses up your glucagon or glucagon, whatever it stores in your liver, as it uses up the carbs that it stores, it flushes out water. So for every 1 gram of sugar your body has, you have like 1.5 grams of water. So as you burn off that extra sugar, your body loses the water and the weight on. So the first thing that happens is your weight drops pretty dramatically, but your body's not really burning a lot of fat at that point. You have to stick with the diet for a long time with that ketogenic diet, and it can work. A lot of people say it works. It works good to get shredded. I don't know too many performance athletes that have a ketogenic diet though. Can't think of any off the top of my head. Maybe you can think of some, but it can totally work if it keeps you satisfied. People have had success with it. So I'm not trying to naysay any diet. I'm just saying a lot of people will jump on the diet and then it plateaus. Then they get hungry for donuts and they eat the donuts and their weight goes back up to what they were before because they couldn't stick with a diet. It's really any diet. If you want it to be effective for lowering your body fat, you just have to stick with it for a long time. I'm on a diet right now. I'm trying to get lower body fat. And it's really hard right now because I'm just hungry all the time. I'm just hungry. I'm a person who has really high hunger, and I'm around my kids who are snacking all the time. So it's really easy, and there's a ton of food that's convenience food. It's really easy to just be like, I'm going to eat some graham crackers. I need to not be eating graham crackers, but it's really easy to do that. When I'm managing the diet really well, slowly losing, want to get probably back down under 200 pounds, which will be really pretty low body fat for me. I'm like 215 right now, which I'm not like super fat at 215, but like I could definitely be a lot thinner. Get back down to like one of my better weights. Keto was pretty good, but I didn't see much weight loss. Husband had good results. Mostly just felt better, honestly. Yeah, and if the thing is, if I do I've done low carb, I've done carb cycling, I've done all kinds of stuff just to experiment. If I'm on a low carb diet or trying to do ketogenic, I feel massively hungry all the time, and I just feel like I'm going to fall asleep. Zero energy. And my athletic performance is like in the dirt. And it doesn't matter how long I stay on it. It's like, you got to stay on it. It's like I've done it for longer periods, and it just doesn't work for me. I don't like it. I like to exercise and like, be at a higher intensity level all the time for me. For me, that's sugar. And I notice brain fog. Like, brain fog's bad. My brain runs on sugar. I just have to, like, keep the sugar pretty low. David, you recently talked about my impression, the difficulty people have in understanding others more intelligent than themselves. I see this in myself and others. Very interesting. Yes, it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it goes both ways, is that intelligent people can't really understand stupid people either. But it's more than that. It's that the person who's on the lower intelligence level really can't conceive of people being smarter than him. He can't understand what smarter means. So the effect is that there's just no way for them to effectively communicate. It's very difficult to effectively communicate with them. That's actually why Trump is such a great communicator, is he can talk really efficiently to smart people and average people and kind of fluidly move between those. It's very difficult to do. He's a master. Apparently I can grow cane sugar in my area. I know we can grow it in Houston. It's a high water crop, yeah, but we have a lot of water here in Houston, so it works. Home Math talks about the levels of intelligence and how they interact with those around them. He's rather bitter, though. Yeah, I mean, he comes off as bitter, but it's like, I understand it. It's like, I spend all my time showing you the solution, and you're like, I don't want that solution. I want this solution. You're like, that's not a solution. That is not a solution to your problem or anyone's problem or society's problems. That's not a solution. And it's like, but I want that to be the solution. But it's not. Right? I want to take away the 19th Amendment. You can't do that. It can't be done without a dictator. So that's not happening. I want the solution to be women just need to change the way that they're acting. They are not. I want a woman who'll just love me for me. She will not. I want a man who's going to be, I want a man who's 6 figures, 6 feet, 6 inches, and completely loyal to me. He will not be. Sorry. He has options. You need to date someone that's on your level. I don't want to. I deserve the best. I deserve a man who's a 10 because I'm a 10. You are a 6. You should date a man who is a 6. That's how you're going to be loyal to each other. That's how you're going to find a loyal man. You know, I can see how he gets bitter because you're just repeating the same things over and over again all the time, and you're going to get pretty tired of that. Anyway, I'm out of time for today. I had a bunch of topics written down. Let's do them rapid fire. Bantha fodder topics. Oh, I can't scroll. My scroll wheel is like not working here. Come on. Okay. So Jimmy Kimmel's back on the air. The left never punishes permanently. Same thing with James Gunn. Remember James Gunn got canceled? And what did they do? They gave him back everything and then some. They just they did it and then they just undid it. They're like, okay, we're going to fire you for now, and then we will rehire you later, okay? There's no permanent consequence to anybody, to any liberal. And it's because they don't really care about the money even. It's mostly like a little game. They care more about that they're ideologically pure. than anything like that. So yes, the left never suffers consequences for its own. Jimmy Kimmel's back on the air. Some people have said they liked the speech Jimmy Kimmel gave. I'm not going to watch it. Remember, Jimmy Kimmel was very pro canceling Roseanne. So I think he should get what's coming to him. Maybe have and then, there's a lot of people that work on the show. Roseanne didn't want the people who worked on her show to lose their jobs. And I respect her a lot for that. But I don't know if Jimmy Kimmel was thinking about that. Sorry. Yeah, Tylenol and autism. So you have this thing. I don't believe Tylenol is one of the few painkillers that it's generally safe in pregnancy because it doesn't cause birth defects. The idea that, and I'm not going to dig into the studies or dig into the science about, is it correlated with higher autism later on? My guess would be that'd be pretty hard to prove. But Tylenol is like any drug, and you shouldn't take anything when you're pregnant unless it's going to provide the appropriate benefit and that benefit is necessary. So taking Tylenol is probably safe if you are in a lot of pain. You need pain relief. The pain relief probably offsets the risk of causing autism, and it's probably dose dependent. If you're taking Tylenol every day when you're pregnant, that's subjecting the fetus to a drug, an outside substance that's not natural, and maybe that'll have an effect. You don't know, but the risk management would be don't take it unless it's necessary, and that's true for any drug. You may have heard that you can have this amount of alcohol when you're pregnant. Actually, no amount of alcohol is safe for the fetus when you are pregnant. The baby can get fetal alcohol syndrome even from very small amounts of alcohol. And some babies don't have fetal alcohol syndrome even though there was moderate alcohol consumption. But there's always a risk of it. So you should not drink at all when you're pregnant. And any drug that you take, there's a risk reward. I had a friend who she had cancer when she was pregnant. And so she was on a chemotherapy. She had to take the chemotherapy while she was pregnant because, yes, it's producing risk for the unborn baby, but she needed to be treated for cancer. And so her being treated was obviously going to be superior to the risk to the baby. And you choose the right drug so that it's going to minimize as much as possible risk to the unborn baby. Baby was totally healthy. He came out fine. Now, unfortunately, she died a few years later when the cancer came back. But treating the cancer was more important than the low-level risk that might have happened to the fetus because she would have died and the baby would die potentially anyway. You have to treat the cancer. So there's a lot of situations like this where, yes, there's still a risk to the unborn baby, but you don't want to take those risks unless you feel like there's a good benefit to them. So even if there's a risk of autism, you could probably think about taking Tylenol if it's really like you really need the pain relief. You can't operate without the pain relief. What else was it? Oh yeah, Bridget Macron. I talked about most of this stuff. Forgiveness. I talked about that last time, so I don't need to talk about that this time. And I think that's all the topics for today. If you want the rundown on forgiveness, I can reiterate it, which is that forgiveness is given to people who are repentant. Unilateral forgiveness is a performative action to me and one that should be viewed that way, as it's like a message action and not really one that to me is super serious. Because I know Charlie Kirk's widow was forgave the shooter, but what does that mean? Are you advocating for the charges to be dropped and for him to walk free? Or would you withdraw that forgiveness if that was the qualification? It's easy to say, I forgive someone when I know that they're going to be executed for the crime. It's different to say, I forgive them and they can walk free. And can you offer a person spiritual forgiveness? Or is that God's domain? See, if you're Catholic and you have the sacrament of reconciliation, sacrament of confession, these things are a little more, there's a little bit more to what forgiveness is than just, I just forgive you. It's like, did the person repent of their evil? Did they attempt to make amends? Did they offer penance? Did they try to go away from that? Did they admit that they were wrong? For this for this killer to receive the sacrament of confession or the sacrament of reconciliation, if he was Catholic, right? He'd have to do all those things. So it would actually be a big thing in order to be reconciled with the body of Christ, to be reconciled with the church. So to reconcile to someone and receive forgiveness requires something, usually, right? Especially if somebody's acting in full malice, full knowledge of what they're doing, mortal sin. So there's a little bit more to the way forgiveness works on the traditional side, whether you're talking like Orthodoxy, Eastern Orthodoxy, or Catholicism, versus what I mostly see evangelicals do, which is this kind of more unilateral, I say I forgive you kind of thing. That's all I'll probably say about that, because I don't want to say anything like really bad about Charlie Kirk's wife for doing that. I'm sure she had reasons for doing it that made sense to her, maybe spiritual reasons to say that you're going to let this go, or maybe saying I forgive you, I believe that you can be redeemed. That's maybe her way of saying that, which I would agree with, right? A lot of those things. So anyway, aside from the concept of forgiveness, do you think hatred is a valid emotion that has value? Absolutely. Jacob, have I loved? Esau, have I hated? I saw a video about Christians discussing hatred and they wrote it off completely. So, hatred for sin can coexist with love for the sinner. And hatred for a person doesn't mean that person's irredeemable or worthless or anything like that. How can you let go of hatred? Hatred can be poisonous. You have Jonah, who didn't want to preach to the people of Nineveh because he hated them. In that case, hatred was a hindrance to his purpose. I think there's more subtlety to hatred than just hatred bad. Well, you don't want to be suicidal. So even if you're completely stoic and feel no hatred, you can know that somebody's bad and you should do something about them. And that's not hatred. Or maybe like making the difference between hatred without reason and hatred that's built upon what a person has done, an individual has done. The Tylenol American thing that came out of this. What just happened? Something fell down. Anyway. There was a thing. Tylenol, maybe you shouldn't take Tylenol when you're pregnant. A bunch of libs decide to shoot videos of them taking drugs while they're pregnant. It's like, holy crap. Now, actually, this reminded me of something, circling back around to Tylenol, is that I've had multiple people say that there's no evidence that smoking pot is bad while you're pregnant. And I have known people that smoked pot while they were pregnant. And things didn't come out. Lack of evidence is not evidence of absence, or absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. People talk about that with God, but it's really true when it comes to, say, something like smoking pot when you're pregnant. We haven't thoroughly studied it, or studies haven't conclusively shown that this causes birth defects or something like that. But that doesn't mean you should do it. That doesn't mean it's been proven safe. It means that it hasn't been proven directly harmful in ways that the studies measured, if that makes any sense. So I don't think you should just smoke pot when you're pregnant either. But I think it's also part of like the poison pill of medical marijuana, which I've talked about in the past. Once you had medical marijuana, people believed that marijuana was automatically medicine and that it wasn't bad for you. And then they smoked so much pot, they become schizophrenic. To forgive someone requires someone asking for it, which most moderns ignore. Avoiding hanging on to anger or grudges is different. I agree. I would probably agree with that. Yeah, the person has to confess that he did it, right? That he's sorry that he did it, that it was wrong to do it, that he will try to make amends with a weregild or some other thing, that he will perform penance to show that he is sorry for this, and to some kind of penance to draw him closer to God, right? Those are all things that we would do for a confession, but we don't want to require them of others. I just forgive you. Okay, I guess I don't get punished for this bad thing. Oh, no. You're still going to get punished, but I forgive you. Well, what exactly does that mean then? That means I'm choosing not to be angry at you anymore about it. Okay, but would you be angry at me if I didn't get punished? Oh, yeah. maybe we need another word here besides forgiveness. Maybe there's a different word than I forgive you. Maybe like I acknowledge your ability to be redeemed. Maybe that's better. I don't know. Maybe we need a different word to express what that feeling really is. Anyway, I don't want to say too much more about that because I really don't want to say bad things about widows or scandalize anyone about that kind of thing. Maybe we can talk about it more when we're a little further away from that event, and we can be more critical of the way people view this stuff. Because there was another one up in Dallas, the same idea. It's like, why would you say this? And why would you feel this? And do you feel it? Or did you feel pressured to say this as part of a public confession of faith? Because that could be it too. I feel that people in my church or my, Pastor Bob would be upset if I didn't say this, so I'll say it. It's like a performative thing. I don't know. I don't know how truthful some of these statements are. Do you really forgive that person? Are you asking for charges to be dropped? And for him to walk free? Are you taking that burden on? Most people are not able to suffer that amount of forgiveness. To forgive is to suffer. To forgive is to suffer. That's it. Have a great one, folks. Let me link to Patreon. I have a story that is coming free for patrons and for people on the Substack. It is called Neon Sun. It's the one we talked about on the stream. It is what if you found yourself transported back in time to Nazi Germany and the only way to stop the Holocaust was to murder Nazis? Oh, but there's going to be a twist at the end. You'll like it. So check that out. What else am I going to... Oh, October's coming up. You guys want some spooky books? Let's get some spooky books. Spooky book number 1, Eyes in the Walls, which I started writing on Halloween years ago. I've written so many books I can't find them in my link list anymore. It's embarrassing. I've written so many books I can't find the links to the book. There it is. That's cool, right? It's cool that I've written so many books I actually can't pick them out of a list because there's so many of them. Spooky book number 1, spooky book number 2, which you can get for free. For free. If you join my mailing list, devspress.com/list. You can get that one for free. What's another one? How about... I have a couple I need to finish up before... I'm going to write some more books. I wanted to get out of the publishing industry and do different things, but I got to finish up a couple books and get them out for you guys. I have so many books I haven't, published. I feel bad. Oh, man, what's another one? Voices of the Void. Another spooky book. Spooky book. One day I'll finish reading a book, and then maybe one day I'll finish writing one too. Have a great one, guys. I'll see you all next time.